Most people look at Cyrus the Great and see a conqueror, a name attached to an empire, filed under ambition, filed under war. That is a coping mechanism. It lets men reduce total dominance to circumstance, to timing, to an accident of birth in the right century. The reality is more clinical. Cyrus did not inherit the largest empire in the ancient world. He engineered it through a doctrine of control so precise it functioned less like conquest and more like architecture. Loyalty built instead of extracted. Mercy calculated instead of felt. Power distributed instead of hoarded. Today, we take that architecture apart, law by law. In 539 BC, Babylon fell without a siege. Cyrus entered the city. Instead of purging it, he issued a proclamation. It was later inscribed on a clay cylinder, and that cylinder now sits in the British Museum. In it, he recorded the restoration of Babylon's neglected temples. He recorded the release of peoples earlier kings had dragged from their homelands, sending them home, gods included. The cylinder does not read like a conqueror's boast. It reads like an accountant's ledger, one repayment following the last. Nowhere does it list the treasures seized. It lists what was given back. This is the cylinder principle. The law that domination without consent is a debt, and every debt comes due. Most conquerors of his era treated control as extraction. Take the wealth, break the will, garrison the ruins. This was the standard Assyrian and Babylonian model for over a century before Cyrus, and it worked until it didn't. Nabonidus, the Babylonian king Cyrus had just replaced, had spent his reign alienating the city's priesthood and merchant class. Neglect mostly, and religious interference they never forgave. By the time Cyrus arrived at the gates, Babylon had already stopped defending him internally. Cyrus understood something colder than force. A subdued population is a liability, and liabilities compound. Every garrison is a cost that never stops being paid. Every resentment is a debt with interest. A loyal population is an asset, and assets compound too quietly without requiring constant maintenance. This is the same mechanism behind the Pareto principle. A small fraction of correctly placed inputs generates most of the outcome. Cyrus did not spend his army policing resentment for decades across a fractured empire. He spent one proclamation once and bought decades of peace with it. The mechanism translates directly to you. Identify the 20% of relationships or decisions in your life actively producing 80% of your results. Stop bleeding effort into the rest. Go further. Audit which of your current obligations exist only because ending them would cause friction, not because they still produce anything. Those are your garrisons. They cost you daily and defend nothing. The average man polices every front at once, exhausted, resented, replaceable. The emperor selects his fronts with precision, and the peace holds itself. There is a harder version of this principle worth naming directly. Forgiveness that costs you nothing is not strategy. It is convenience wearing strategy's clothes. The cylinder principle only functions when the debt being cancelled was real, when the population genuinely had grounds for resentment, and the proclamation genuinely addressed them. Performing generosity toward people who never had a grievance buys nothing, because there was no debt to erase. Know the difference before you spend the gesture. But loyalty purchased at the top means nothing if the machine beneath it cannot survive contact. Which brings us to the second law. According to Herodotus, after Cyrus defeated the Lydian king Croesus, he ordered him placed on a pyre. Croesus, awaiting death, cried out the name of the philosopher Solon. He was recalling a warning. No man should be called fortunate until his life is ended. Cyrus heard this. He reportedly reconsidered and had the fire extinguished. Herodotus claims Croesus went on to serve as his advisor. This account is contested. Some scholars, reading the fragmentary Babylonian record, believe Croesus may in fact have been executed rather than spared. Persian tradition also forbade the burning of captured princes who had not rebelled, which complicates the pyre scene further. The legend endures regardless. because it teaches something the fact alone does not. Herodotus himself was not naive about it. He offers 3 separate theories for why Cyrus staged the burning at all: a sacrificial offering, a religious test, before settling on the version that survived. The uncertainty is part of the record, not a flaw in it. This is the Croesus Reversal, the law that mercy, deployed with precision, outperforms cruelty as a strategic asset. Nietzsche described the will to power not as domination for its own sake. He described it as the mastery required to redirect force with intention rather than instinct. Executing Croesus would have satisfied instinct completely and cost nothing in the moment. Sparing him, and reportedly using his counsel afterward, converted an enemy into a resource instead. A rival kingdom's entire institutional memory, absorbed rather than incinerated. Consider what that memory contained. Croesus had ruled Lydia for over a decade. He knew its trade routes, its noble families, its grievances, its weaknesses. A depth no outside conqueror could replicate in a generation. Killing him would have destroyed all of it in a single afternoon for the brief satisfaction of the flame. The mechanism, before eliminating an obstacle, ask what it becomes if kept alive under your control. Not forgiven, not trusted blindly, simply repositioned and used. A defeated rival, absorbed correctly, is often worth more than a defeated rival, erased. This is not softness. It requires more discipline than cruelty does, because instinct wants the fire, and strategy has to override it. The average man burns every bridge his anger builds for him. The strategist tests, first, whether that bridge could carry weight in his direction. Notice what the Croesus Reversal does not claim. It does not claim every enemy is worth absorbing. Some obstacles genuinely are just obstacles, with nothing inside them worth keeping. The discipline is not blanket mercy. It is the pause before the fire, long enough to genuinely check. An absorbed rival still needs somewhere to stand inside the machine, which brings us to the third law. Cyrus governed an empire spanning from the Aegean to the Indus. Dozens of peoples, dozens of languages, dozens of local customs. None of them Persian in origin. He did not attempt to rule any of it directly, and he did not try to erase what he had conquered. He divided the empire into satrapies, provinces each under a regional governor answerable to the crown. Each satrapy kept its own laws, its own gods, its own local customs largely intact. A Babylonian remained Babylonian under Cyrus. A Lydian remained Lydian. In exchange, tribute and loyalty flowed upward to the throne. Rebellion became the exception, not the constant condition the empire had to fight. This structure was later refined under Darius, who formalized fixed tribute assessments and royal inspectors called the King's Eyes. But the underlying architecture, delegated regional rule answering to a central crown, was already Cyrus's design. He built the frame that later kings only had to furnish. This is the Satrapy Machine. The law that command does not scale through personal control. It scales through engineered distance. This mirrors a basic principle of cognitive load. The human mind, including a king's, can only track a finite number of direct inputs before decision quality collapses entirely. Every additional decision funneled through one man is a decision made with less attention than the one before it. Cyrus could not personally adjudicate every dispute from Sardis to Babylon to the Persian heartland, so he did not try. He built layers instead, each one absorbing complexity before it ever reached him raw. A dispute in a Lydian market never needed to reach the Persian court at all. It was resolved at the level built to resolve it. The mechanism, for you, separate what genuinely requires your direct hand from what only requires your standard. Write the standard down once. Delegate the second category downward, completely. Check it upward, on a schedule, but do not touch it daily. If you find yourself redeciding something you already delegated, the failure is in your standard, not in the person you delegated to. Fix the standard. Most ambitious men collapse under self-imposed micromanagement, mistaking control for competence, and confusing exhaustion for diligence. The emperor built structure precisely so his attention stayed reserved for what only he could decide. The failure mode runs in both directions, worth naming plainly. Delegate without a written standard, and you have not built a satrapy. You have built confusion with extra steps, and the eventual failure will look like someone else's fault when the design was always yours. A structure that delegates power still needs a man at the center, built to hold it. Which brings us to the fourth law, Xenophon's Cyropedia, part history and part idealized political fiction, describes Cyrus's youth in the Persian and Median courts. It claims he was trained rigorously there, hunting for endurance, judgment through arbitration, the command of small groups of men before large ones. All of this, long before he ever commanded an empire of his own. The legend claims he was tested constantly. Physical hardship and small, unglamorous acts of justice between servants and boys his own age. One scene the text returns to repeatedly is judgment over petty disputes. A torn cloak, a stolen game matters far beneath the concerns of an empire he did not yet possess. The text insists these small verdicts mattered. They trained a mind to weigh fairness under no pressure, long before it had to weigh fairness under enormous pressure. Whether every detail is history or embellishment, the pattern is the point. Authority, when it finally came, was recognition of something already built over years, not a gift suddenly granted to an unfinished man standing in the right place at the right moment. This is the education of command. The law that authority must be trained into a man before it is handed to him. Untrained, it crushes him on arrival. This tracks a documented biological pattern known as the winner effect. Repeated small victories, earned under real pressure, physically recalibrate an organism's baseline confidence and its future willingness to compete. The effect has been observed directly in controlled studies. A subject who wins a minor contest shows measurably increased confidence in the contest that follows, regardless of the stakes involved. A man handed status without those repetitions never built the underlying chemistry to carry it. He inherits the title and none of the recalibration that should have preceded it. This is precisely why sudden power breaks so many men who earned nothing wrong to receive it. Cyrus accumulated his winner effect early. In hunts and disputes, no historian bothered recording. None of it looked significant enough to record at the time. The mechanism: stop waiting for a title to force your discipline into existence. Build the discipline first, in private. Through small, repeated contests, you genuinely have to win. Choose ones with real stakes, however minor. A commitment kept when no one is checking. A standard held when breaking it costs you nothing visible. When the position finally opens, you will not be learning the part. You will simply be occupying ground you already hold. The average man requests authority and hopes to grow into it later. The general grows into it first and requests nothing because the ground is already his. One warning belongs here. Private discipline can curdle into private theater, contests staged only to feel earned rather than to actually test anything. The stakes have to be real enough that losing would genuinely cost you something. Otherwise, you are rehearsing the feeling of the winner effect without producing the chemistry that makes it real. Even a man built correctly for command leaves behind less proof of himself than smaller men who shouted louder. Which brings us to the final law. Compare this to the Assyrian kings before him. They filled palace walls with reliefs, celebrating their own conquests in detail. Rows of captives, burning cities, kings kneeling in tribute, carved so their victories could never be mistaken. Cyrus left remarkably little self-glorifying monument behind him. No boastful inscriptions cataloging atrocities in stone, mostly one cylinder, describing restoration rather than domination. His tomb at Pasargadae tells the same story in stone. It is a modest structure, 6-step tiers beneath a small chamber, dwarfed by the palaces of far lesser kings who came after him. Later Greek writers claimed an inscription once stood there, something plain and unadorned. No trace of it survives today, The men who reported it admitted they were recalling it from memory, decades after they claimed to have seen it. What we can say with certainty is simpler and more telling. The tomb itself remains, and it is small, and an empire that kept functioning for generations after he was gone. This is the silent death. The law that a system built correctly requires no continuous advertisement from the man who built it. Memento mori is the discipline of building as though your own name will not be the thing that survives you. Only the structure will. Cyrus did not need Babylon to remember his face. He needed Babylon to remain governable in his absence. And it did, under his son and long beyond him. Even his own death carries this pattern. Herodotus reports that Cyrus fell fighting the Satrapy, a nomadic people beyond his empire's eastern edge, killed in battle against their queen Tamaris, in a campaign of his own choosing. Herodotus himself notes there were multiple competing accounts of how Cyrus died. He treats his own version as the most credible, never as confirmed. No golden monument marks that final battlefield. The empire simply continued without him, exactly as the architecture was built to do. The mechanism: build one system this month that requires nothing further from you once it is running. A process, a standard, a piece of work that outlasts your daily involvement in it entirely. Test it deliberately. Step away from it for a week and see what breaks. What breaks was never built at all. What holds was. The average man performs his value loudly because he needs witnesses to confirm it is real. The architect builds value that does not require him present to keep functioning. This is the hardest law to practice because it offers no applause along the way. No one congratulates a man for a system. Nobody notices precisely because it never breaks. That silence is not the absence of success. In this framework, it is the signature of it. Drop the belief that conquest itself was ever the machine. It was never the point. Define which 20% of your effort is producing your results. Adopt mercy as a calculated instrument, never as a soft feeling you indulge when convenient. Build the discipline before any title exists to demand it of you. Start one system this month that runs without your daily hand on it. Refuse to need an audience to confirm the structure is sound. The empire was never the proof. The architecture was always the proof. Become the architect.